Our first guest today is Mike Massey. And what can I say about Mike? He started Massey's professional outfitters many years ago in New Orleans. And it actually has been a go-to, I know this for a fact, it's been a go-to store in the New Orleans area for years and years and years with regard to outdoor products. And since he didn't have enough to do, he decided that he wanted to start an online business and drive online and the benefits of online to specialty stores around the country, working for both brands and specialty stores. And we met about 20 years ago when I started 3.5, and it was a retail salesperson online training company, and Mike got it right away, and we've been good friends ever since. So it's an honor to have you on Channel Signal, our first interview series called Out and Back, and welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. It's great. I do remember that time all the way back in the northern woods of Georgia, meeting you and your grand scheme to change the rep training world for the better. And kudos to you for getting it right.
Well, thank you. I can also remember that the Grassroots held in June their sales meeting in Snowbird, and I was there with a big TV, an old-fashioned TV, and also talking with retailers about it. And I remember it was about minus 500 in there.
Totally. And wet.
and, and wet. Let's get on with our first question, and it's really a two-part question. It's demand and the supply channel, and the demand of 2021 is going to be a lot different than it's ever been before. People have a new perspective on life. They're booking trips, they're embracing new adventures. They're buying a lot of equipment, especially outdoor equipment, and the impact on retail sales, it's massive already. Projections indicate a 13.5% increase over 2020, which builds on last year's pandemic increase of 32%. So when you add those two up, we have about a 45 or 46% increase over 2019 in demand alone.
Wow.
And, now we have the 4th of July holiday coming up, and that is also looks like it's going to be a bump of about another $1 billion on top of that. So people have been vaccinated, or many have been vaccinated, and it's opening up. Now you combine that with the supply chain, which record long lead times, wide scale shortages, rising commodity prices, and difficulty in getting the products to our shore. I looked at the Institute for Supply Manufacturers and found that right now in May, the materials have now reached a record 85 days getting to their destination. So it's lead times, of at least 85 days. So we have exploding demand. We have, especially for outdoor products, and a clogged supply chain. It's a long-winded question, but I wanted to supply a few things for you. How long do you think it's going to be before this supply chain is straightened out, and then it can match up with the burgeoning demand?
Yeah. So I don't have as much to do with retail as I used to, but I still have my office in Massey's on the second floor, and I'm listening to our buyers talk to our suppliers, and and we're hearing that this doesn't really straighten itself out until at least next spring, and and some of them feel like it's going to last a little bit longer than that, because there's impacts throughout the supply chain, and even though perhaps finished goods, can get sent out faster, there's impacts all the way up into zippers and colors and dyes and things like that. So I think we're going to see it lasting for a little bit.
How are you going to manage to that? How would you think that retail will manage to that? Because consumers are coming in and saying, we want this and we can't, your reply is, we can't get it until what, spring?
Well, so like I jokingly tell our buying team that, they have to come to work every day and put their day trader hat on. And that means, chasing down, stuff that we can get. We're not here to just have the lights on and stand around in our store. We're here to sell things. And if that means that like we are, making some shifts in some of our choices or perhaps even some of our categories, that is what's happening. Things like bikes, kayaks, rainwear, some of our sportswear brands, those can't easily be replaced. But there are things that are available, and if we're open-minded in the way we approach our assortment planning, then we're okay. And on top of that, like it's allowed us to de-risk a lot of our inventory. When a manufacturer transfers merchandise to a retailer, that they also transfer all the risk of holding the inventory. And and years from 2019 and prior, it was great. I mean, the manufacturers could transfer all of their risk down the supply chain, get it into the stores, and the stores would sit there, even with their long dating, holding too much merchandise to sell. And so like I think that it's like given a lot of companies an opportunity to sit back and think, what is the actual demand for my products? What does it look like organically? And instead of stuffing the supply chain, it's like an artist filling up an art studio rather than, making enough just to be sold to, the end enthusiast. And I think that we were doing a lot of that in 17, 18, and 19. I think that resets actually, while it's a pain point for consumers in some ways, it's also been a pretty good, piece in the supply chain. It's given everybody a chance to rethink, where they want to go.
How close to real time or the march towards real time in the supply chain, because that would be really beneficial for the retail sector.
Absolutely.
How's that coming?
I think there's a lot of systems that are being put in place to like, monitor the supply chain in realer time. And that includes all the way downstream, like looking at actual retailer inventory, what's in the pipeline. I think let's say that like in the past we had slack in the line, and now we've got like an over tightness in the line, and getting it to like you're just to that just in time spot. I think we're going to come out of this probably next spring or maybe next fall in a spot where perhaps we won't go back to like, this tremendous amount of slack in the pipeline where goods are being made with the intent to be sent to TJ Maxx, after the first sell-in, where TJ Maxx is making commitments to like buy XX product and excess product is being made. I think that we're not going to go back to that. And I think that that's actually a really good thing.
The 4th of July, what are you seeing now, both from a locally standpoint and from Massey's standpoint? What is the big demand for the products right now?
It is get outdoors. I mean, it is exactly what you started with. It is, people are getting back on planes. I've traveled, a couple times so far on, family vacations, and everywhere I've been, absolutely packed. There's a supply chain issue and merchandise issue, but there's also, I mean, I'm based in New Orleans. There's issues here with like bartenders, waiters, people that work in hotels. My wife just came back from, a Caribbean trip, and, they had issues with like staffing. Everybody's like kind of, trying to get that employee to come work for them. So I think there's peculiar bottlenecks, economic disequilibriums that are occurring throughout. But the signal that consumers are sending is that they want to spend money to go do things again. They want to like get moving again, and it's really obvious.
So the supply chain, you and I used to know, well, this was before the pandemic, about 80% of revenue was generated by brick and mortar.
Yep.
And about 20% was generated by online. Now, that is, I'm not saying that's flipped, but the pandemic certainly moved online from 20% to a big number.
Sure, it was a bigger number. Stores were closed. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The internet is the ultimate resource for us to shop, whether we're going to a movie theater or going to dinner or going on a vacation. The internet is our de facto source of information now, source of truth for, what to buy, where to buy it, how to get it, what to eat, what band you like. I mean, everybody uses the internet for all those decisions. That said, brick and mortar retail still growing. I mean, we see the numbers come out. It's growing this year. Surprisingly, it grew last year. Despite all the stores being closed, it still eked out a tiny little bit of growth. I personally, sitting in a retail store, our business is great. And I have, like you mentioned earlier, I'm deeply involved in grassroots. I don't know of any retail store in distress. We're doing a lot less advertising than we've ever done, but we have more foot traffic walking in the door. I think that there's this new blended consumer approach. We've talked about omni-channel, we talked about multi-channel, we talked about all these kind of things. I don't really think there's a such thing as any of those. I just think that there's like a buying channel, and it's online informed mostly, and the conversions are happening both online and offline. And right now we're seeing a lot of conversions happening in brick and mortar. I mean, I've basically tamped down my online business entirely, and I'm relying much more on locally than ever before. I've tamped down my online business I don't need to ship things to strangers. I can't even get stuff. I don't need to be acquiring customers and spending money to do that. I've got my local customers are creating enough demand for the products that I carry that I am absolutely satisfied with my brick and mortar business, even if that was my only business.
What's driving those consumers into your doors?
There's no doubt whatsoever that consumers are walking in the door because of online information. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Anybody who thinks otherwise is crazy. And it's the same thing that's happening in restaurants. People, everybody that's listening to this is going to go to Yelp or go to OpenTable or perhaps TripAdvisor, read information about where to go eat today or tomorrow or dinner this weekend with their friends, and they're going to make a decision. They might book a table, or they might just go there. But the reality is that online information informs consumer behavior almost entirely at this point. So while I could go back and forth about what the percentages are of this or that, when you look at a company like Home Depot, which is a harbinger of a lot of information, I think at this point, it's almost 60% of their online transactions are for curbside or in-store pickup. Okay, they're seeing online informed shopping as being the largest, and I don't even want to call it channel if there's an omni-channel concept, but they're seeing online informed purchases, growing in an explosive way. So is Walmart.
So locally.com, near the buy button, you have options with your brands, and I hope I say this correctly, but you do have options with your brands of a sign there or a click-through where it says, do you want to buy locally?
Right.
Are you seeing that hit more coming out of the pandemic?
It's some days it actually blows our hair back, to be honest with you. Some of the brands that we work with that have leaned in heavily on the notion of there only being a buy my products channel rather than all these separate income statements and all these different kind of things that companies like to dream up. The companies like Apple, who are just we don't care how you're going to get our product, we just want you to get it. We're seeing tremendous growth with those companies. Okay, we now locally interacts with about 1 million people a day. We show all of them, these are where you buy the products, and we expect, a very large percentage of those, based on Google's own information, a very large percentage of those people will be in a store in the next 24 hours. They're online informed local shoppers.
Mm-hmm. And give us about 15 to 30 seconds on the locally platform so our viewers know exactly what that is.
Sure. So locally is essentially Amazon for people who want to walk in a store rather than have a box shipped to them. So, we're simultaneously a marketplace environment and a series of tools that brands and retailers can use to reach online shoppers using digital commerce tactics, but then drive them to a BOPUS or a click and collect or a curbside or a same-day delivery transaction. So we don't have anything to do with shipped packages. We focus entirely on the user behavior of online, offline shopping, or as some of the big, retailers, big online retailers like to call that web rooming, where people shop online, buy locally, and that's what we're focused on as a user behavior. We think that is actually, and so do our partners like Google, think that is actually the main consumer behavior.
Yeah, and you touched on this, but I want to touch on this again. most of the time it starts with, in consumer behavior, it starts with a conversation, or in that conversation leads to what's the second step. Well, typically the second step is they go online and they take a look at the product reviews. And a large amount of people are going to Amazon and
Right.
they're staying now, and they're reading reviews. Now, a smaller number every month is dropping off of Amazon and saying, okay, I'm using them for the reviews, but I'm going and shopping in
That's
other
right.
areas or looking at a lot of variations of the theme. It could be other big e-commerce sites. It could be specialty. It could be I'm going to my local brick and mortar to take a
Mhm.
look at their online and maybe they have an in store. Are you seeing the same things?
I'm seeing exactly the same thing. For a long time, we all talked about like the four legs of Amazon, which was, selection, original information, logistics, and price. And Amazon really over the last year has proved that like price is a lot less of an issue than logistics, selection, and original information. And original information for Amazon is one of their primary blood flows. Those reviews are Amazon's original information. That's one of the main ways that they keep people sticky to their site, along with all the other stuff. What's happening is exactly what you're saying. People are like, doing product research online, but it's like TripAdvisor. I read information online about hotels or destinations, but then my next place that I'm going to be is on a hotel website, or I might be booking tickets, nearby. So yes, I collect information from the internet to like inform my next purchase or decide whether this phone is right or whether this restaurant is right. And it's very important part of the consumer journey. But like whether you're online or offline, you're in the funnel at that point. Okay. And how you shape the walls of the funnel is going to dictate, is this person going to buy your products? Okay. So like, are you going to let Amazon, be the better company at logistics? They're at 60% of, market share now of the whole internet. Okay. They were at the gold rush first. They've won it. Everybody else is still building up their, their horse and buggy, and they're heading out west, but like, it's over. It's like, so this is an insurmountable challenge for people who are trying to get started, or a brand that's trying to, get themselves online, of overcoming the amount of original content that Amazon has and is able to generate. It's almost insurmountable. And so like, how do you control the funnel? Like local stores have, like Amazon, a lot of original content in the form of like employees who can help people with things.
Mhm.
And I think what you're doing is tapping into, across the board, how you get somebody from the very rim of the funnel down deep into it, where they can then make a logistics or, a type of purchase decision, but you got to get them down there. You got to get them far enough in where they go, I trust this.
Hmm. And what's also interesting is like backcountry.com just opened a store in Park City. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been online, now they're in store.
That's what they're all doing.
They're all doing it. So anymore with consumer behavior, when we do our consumer research, they don't even look at, well, what do you mean online, offline? What's all that mean? Because here's how I do things. Okay. And they look at it all as one. Okay.
Yeah,
And what's
that's right.
interesting and what's interesting is how will the brands manage that? Because the brands in the past have looked at things as, these are my distribution channels. This is how I look at things. And I have key account managers for REI, and I've got all sorts of things. How, when the consumer looks at this now, the consumer looks at this as one big buying opportunity, and I have a lot of different options here. How will the brands look at this?
Well, the brands are being torn apart by exactly the same things that that the retailers were being torn apart by 10 years ago and had to adapt to. The brands are now being torn apart by all of the gatekeepers and all the toll bridges, all the different ways that, like, the Googles and the Amazons and the, the really big guys, the eBays or the whatever. I mean, how do we gatekeep this so that, like, we get like a large percentage, 15 to 18% of your sale? How do we do this? And in our vision is, rather than any of that, rather than creating another AOL or creating a CompuServe or a private environment or a walled garden or any kind of stuff, like, our focus is on, like, how do we connect everybody to everybody? How do we connect the consumer and let them make all those choices while collecting the information they need to complete their purchase agnostically, which is really the most important part of this. Is how do we get away from these proprietary, businesses that like are mostly serving to like gatekeep, the consumer behavior. Consumers are like, I don't care, I'll buy it on Amazon, I'll buy whatever. But the problem is that it would be like Walmart having 60% of like all, physical retail.
Mm-hmm.
All of your choices are less than. All of your brand negotiating power is less. All of your retailer negotiating power becomes less. And so I don't think, any of those things are really good.
Yeah. And what's also interesting to me is how does locally fit into all of this? You've got the consumer looking at it. This is my buying opportunity with a lot of issues, and I don't care whether it's online or offline. Then you have the brands who have got to make that adjustment on where do they market, how do they advertise, and those kind of things.
Right.
Do you think that the brands really understand yet that the consumer is totally in charge?
I think that a lot of them do, and I think that a lot of them don't. So I think that there's some really good brands that are leading the charge right now. I'm going to use an example for you. We work with Yeti. So when we first started working with Yeti, they were very much like, we're going to build this direct consumer business model. And your vision for retail really isn't part of that. And they saw it as very much like opposite ends of the spectrum. And so for us, we're like, no, you don't like building goodwill in a local store at a Whole Earth or at a, even your own store. That's great. And that also drives online shopping. They really kind of changed their vision. I don't know where they were along in their sales growth, but like they changed their vision to like, let's just make sure the consumer buys our product, wholesale, retail, our brick and mortar, our partners brick and mortar, Ace Hardware, Lowe's, we don't care. Just, and I think that that's boded really well for them. I think there's other companies that, that are still trying to find their footing in a direct consumer world. And I think that single brand, single retailer business models are very, very, very difficult to stand up, especially in clothing. I think the Patagonias of the world are really unicorns in the clothing space that can drive a profitable, brick and mortar, a profitable D2C business. But I think the vast majority of, clothing companies that want to sell direct to consumer without any wholesale channel are going to find themselves in a lot of pain.
Now, online still has a problem in that 70%, 80% of consumers abandon shopping carts. That's a problem.
Oh yeah.
Because what it does is it freezes inventory for at least 2 to 3 weeks. And if 70% of people are abandoning the cart and it's just sitting there, just think about the amount of billions of dollars that is just sitting there with no commitment whatsoever. And then you have that there's only about a 3% conversion rate of consumers who go to a site and actually hit the buy button.
Yeah.
How are you combating that, or how do you think that is going to improve, and how do you think they should improve that?
I think that you really need to disintermediate the notion of shopping from purchasing. I think that like if you ran a brick and mortar chain of stores and you decided you're going to put your store in a mall to drive footfall, and then you come to your store and you say, oh, well, look at this. My store is getting 1,000 people a day walking in the store, but only 10% of them buy. Whereas this other freestanding store, 50% of people walk in the door buy. So there must be something wrong with my mall store. But that's not the reality of it. Is that people tend to wander around the internet, and we've got clients that only do 0.5% conversion rates. Like people wander around the internet, and the goal here is to influence their purchase, separate that from like the actual purchase happening, and you look at your Warren Buffett model of like the long-term view of the consumer. Mm-hmm. Can I keep this person in my brand for 10 years? And the way to do that is to make sure that like they have a lot of touches of your brand in a way that like makes sense for them. If you only rigidly say that like online shopping results in a purchase from me, then yeah, 99% of people who visit your site are going to be lost to other purchase methods.
What do you think's the biggest problem? So do you think, so I think what you're doing is you're separating rate of conversion at the buy button from the shopping cart abandonment, saying shopping cart abandonment is just them shopping. That's all they're doing.
Yeah.
And so if you get them down to the buy button, and only 3 out of 100 are hitting the buy button, is it because they have too many options? Is it because they're price shopping? Is it because that the product descriptions were not good enough? They didn't have enough product reviews. What do you think? What do
I
you
think
think?
there's an array of reasons why, but probably the largest and most important thing is that, you know, just like having a store in the mall, people are there to entertain themselves. They're visiting your site and they're looking at your cooler, or they're looking at your bike, or they're looking at your clothing, you know, and they really probably 50% of them have no intention to buy, and probably 70% of them can't buy. You know, one of the people that's in our orbit is a specialist in you know, consumer psychological behavior. You know, and we look at some of these things. Most people that visit a site, like, they're not there to buy. They don't. It's just like the people in a mall. You know, there are people walking in jewelry stores at malls that are not equipped to be able to buy. It doesn't matter what the offer is. It doesn't matter where you put the button or the cash register. They are not going to buy. They're there, you know, just as information seeking or time, you know, wasting.
So, and the difference there is they don't walk out with the inventory and say they're going to take it for 2 weeks and test it. Whereas online, they go to the shopping cart and they take it out of the inventory. So, you know, how do you see them maybe taking that shopping cart abandonment down just, you know, a touch? Or do you just ignore it and say, I'm happy that they were here, and I'll do my email campaigns to say, hey, you know, after a few days, I'll say, are you going to purchase, or, you know, buy now, or a discount or whatever, to get them out. But after a week or 2 weeks, you just say, okay, is that just the cost of doing business?
Well, I think that the very first step in that is to understand the reasons why you actually are putting information about your store or your brand online. Okay. And, you know, before the internet came along, you know, people spent millions of dollars to put, you know, to put ads in magazines. Those plainly didn't lead to a magazine. You know, nobody looked at a magazine and called a number and gave them a credit card, and like, that wasn't a thing. You know, marketing is a continuum, and you've got to decide, like, you know, what's my effort here that is meant to, like, bolster and build goodwill for my brand and build enthusiastic customers that are going to go spread the word about my brand to their friends. What part of it is that? And once you understand that, like, you know, that a large portion of people are just collecting information and perhaps will talk about your products to your customers, and then the rising tide effect is occurring. Mm-hmm. Yes, some people that you're trying to drive to your site come through Google Shopping, or come, you know, maybe they start on Amazon and click through, but like, some people are looking to make a purchase, and you have to be prepared and optimize the bottom of the funnel like you're describing. But a lot of them are just there, like, trying to learn about your products. And I think that the worst thing you can do, and I'm going to use Apple again as a great example, at the very bottom of Apple's conversion funnel, okay, the very last thing they do is ask you how you want to get your product. Okay, do you want it shipped? Do you want to pick it up, or do you want it delivered? Mm-hmm. I think that, like, the best way to make sure that, like, you know, the customer ends up with your product in their hand, rather than driving them, you know, generically off to some address, is to, like, give them the opportunity to, like, you know, choose how they want to do it at the end. I think that that's a great way to get the final conversion and make sure your product stays on, you know, on their back, or that they're riding it the next day. That's what you want to do.
And the funnel now is probably it will be much different. And to get your opinion on this, it used to be the funnel would be deliver the product to specialty, since it was 80% of your revenue. Make sure there's a lot of co-op dollars there to support them.
Sure.
Do the branding in the magazines, those kind of things, and then drive everything down to retail. Now with online, and you have this mix of online, how does that funnel how do you think the new normal is regarding that funnel? So is there, it's not a funnel anymore because you don't come in from the top, you come in from the sides
All
and
different angles, yeah.
top and all different angles?
Well, I mean, what's happening in my opinion is that retailers are trying to crowd into the top part. Okay, most retailers aren't that interested in like trying to become great e-commerce merchants. They've got their brick and mortar stores, and so they're trying to get some information in front of the shopper about the products that they carry, and hopefully entice that shopper to like walk into their store. And what we see from like Google's own stats is that 74% of people who are shown that a product is near them will be in a store within 74 hours. Ask Best Buy, Target, Home Depot, Walmart. That's what's happening, is that these guys are seeing very, very high conversion rates for brick and mortar. Get people to the store, get them to the store, get them to the store. If they can do that, that's how you keep a customer to be a loyal customer. And then our argument is that loyal customers convert at a much higher rate. People who love your products, when they come to your site, maybe it's the second, third, or eighth time, they buy at a much higher rate. They're already familiar with your brand. You're not trying to convince them of how good your brand is. They might be wearing one of your products at that moment, Lululemon, for example. They've discovered your products in a store. The next time they come to your site, you've already overcome all of those barriers. Is this going to fit me? What is it going to look like? That customer knows that they like your products. That's a really big part of unifying all the different sales channels under one roof.
Mm-hmm. So if we're going to unify all of this under one roof, then what would be, we're starting to talk about the new normal. And so when you talk about unifying under one roof and you talk about all the options that the consumers have, and we talk about a variety of different things, in the spring of 2022, in the summer of 2022, what do you think is different? What's the new normal?
I think that like the way I like to say this is that and I alluded to this at the very beginning, I think that what's happening and what we're seeing is that back in the 90s, somebody discovered gold in California. Okay. And a lot of people got in their wagons and they came all the way from the East Coast. Some of them got there first. Some of them staked out plots of land. Some of them staked out really big plots of land. Some staked out other big plots, and some staked out small plots of land. A few of the big plots of land are producing a lot of gold. A few of the other ones are never going to produce gold, but people are still betting on them. And there's a whole lot of people back here that are just now starting to think about it. But the reality is that the online shopping space is maturing. Okay, to your question, every year that goes by, online becomes more mature. Okay, when you could first book a dinner reservation with Open Table, it was a novelty and people used it like crazy. But it's just become like the norm now. I think Click and Collect, BOPUS, these are all pretty new, and we're seeing a lot of uptake in the early time. But the reality is that like Home Depot's been at the BOPUS business for a while. It's mature for them, and it's a large percentage of their business. And I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see all of these kind of consumer options just become the norm, like Fandango and buying your ticket, or Ticketmaster and buying your sports event. Like it's just the way it happens. You don't go buy your plane ticket at a Delta little office anymore. You just buy it online, and retail is going to evolve to that too.
So we talked about consumer research, and we talked about how product reviews drive consumer research.
Yes.
It is the
one of the main legs.
One of the main legs of consumer research. Now, if that's the case, brands are having somewhat of a problem getting product reviews on their site.
Yes.
And Amazon started this a long time ago to say, we have to keep those reviews on our site so that they stay on our site because it drives revenue. Now, if you have brand.coms, and this also trickles down to the specialty stores, especially the grassroots buying groups and all the other buying groups with regard to the specialty, they're having problems getting product reviews and getting consumers to write product. So if you've got a driver that drives business and you can't get that driver on your website, what do you do?
Well, so you're right, Paul. I completely agree with you. And you and I have been like going back and forth about this for a very long time. And we identified at the very beginning that Amazon has three legs of their stool, and one of those is original content. And I don't think that a single brand, single retailer is ever going to be successful at driving a lot of original content because they don't have a community around them. Like even if you're a great clothing brand or a great bike brand or you're a great cooler brand, I think that the biggest challenge you face is creating a community on your own site where reviews are seen by a lot of people and commented on it. And Amazon has a real big lead in that. It's why we invented locally as more of a marketplace and less of a single freestanding entity. Okay. I think that like what you're doing, your aggregation of the content can, and your sensing of the data gives what the consumer is really looking for. And I think that like having that near the conversion funnel is critically important. It's just like having no content on the page for the product. Yeah, there's the product, but like there's no content, no original content or anything. Like having review content is critically important to like the consumer.
Yeah, and what Channel Signal has done is bake that into an aggregated score and putting that score next to the buy button. So when you go to a brand or a specialty shop, you see, okay, I've already done my research, and I've gone to Zappos and I've gone to Amazon. Now I'm going back to the brand, or I'm going to my favorite specialty store because there's some brand trust there.
That's right.
And that's never going to go away. And so one of the things about an aggregated score is you put that there, and now consumers, in the research that we're seeing, the consumers are saying, okay, that's enough to put me over the top when I see a market score there of what everybody thinks of the performance of that product. And perhaps that's one solution, but certainly the voice of the consumer is going to have to be brought into the online brands more and into specialty shops more. Do you agree?
I couldn't agree more. And look, I grew up, and I think you grew up in the same period of time where, you had the good housekeeping seal of approval, you had UL ratings, you had consumer report scoring and the best car. And that still is a thing that exists. Okay. It's just that it's become detached from the consumers. Like if I want to buy a car, I'm going to go read reviews. Okay. I just am. And, one of those reviews might be Consumer Reports. And so like having those reviews available to me that like, basically say this is a trusted product among consumers, critically important for my buying decisions.
Mike, this has been terrific for, our interview series with Out and Back. You once again, our producer said, well, is he going to have opinions, and can he really express himself? And I said, of all the people that I know, Mike Massey will cover both those bases in spades.
There you go. Good.
Well, thank you for your time, Mike. Sure appreciate it.
I really appreciate it too.